We got everyone counted? Excellent. Thank you. Woohoo! We like the sound of that. Yes. All righty, everyone. If we could gather and come together. Come on in, come on over. If you want to put your bags down, you can also put them down over here. No problem, or you can hold on to them. It's up to you. Give everyone a moment. Excellent. Hello, everyone. How are we doing today? I'm doing great. Well, welcome to today's curator's tour of Soy Ana Agnabi, the latest exhibition by artist Jackie Milad. My name is Liz Faust. If we don't know each other, I'm the new director of exhibitions and curator here at Goucher Art Galleries, and I am quite delighted to guide you through this very powerful and layered body of work. Now, in case you don't know, Jackie Milad is a Baltimore-based artist of Egyptian and Honduran heritage whose work explores how identity, language, and history overlap, often in ways that are fragmented, conflicting, or even deliberately obscured. The title of this exhibition, Soy Ana Agnabi, translates roughly from Spanish and Arabic to No soy, I am not, in Spanish, and I am a foreigner, Ana Agnabi, in Arabic. It's a statement of resistance, of multilingual, hybrid, and unresolved nature. It refuses the comfort of singular identity. Now, Milad uses this tension between belonging and unbelonging, between heritage and displacement, as the emotional and conceptual core of this show. You'll notice reoccurring imagery throughout the exhibition, small sculptural figures called shabtis, which we'll go into a little bit more in a bit. These originate in ancient Egypt, where they were placed in tombs to serve the deceased in the afterlife. Over thousands of years, these figures have been excavated, sold, and dispersed into museum collections around the world, including right here at Goucher College. Milad's exhibition resurrects the shabti, not as a relic, but as a living metaphor. She reimagines them as witnesses to history, as symbols of displacement, and as carriers of cultural memories. Now, let's begin with the first installation, where these figures gather in a kind of collective ritual. And please feel free to move while I'm talking. It's not, I don't have slides. So please feel free to move. Now, here in Soy Ana Agnabi, Milad anchors her exhibition in the haunting afterlife of the shabti. Again, to reiterate, small funerary figures from ancient Egypt meant to solely accompany the dead into eternity. Once protectors, witnesses, and servants of the afterlife, these figures were designed to awaken on command. They're inscribed with spells from the Book of the Dead that instructed them to perform the labors of the deceased in the underworld. Their purpose was both spiritual and domestic, woven into a cosmology where care for the dead were inseparable from care from the land, the body, and the divine order. Yet, the modern fate of these figures is marked by rupture. In the 19th and 20th century, European excavations, often sanctioned under colonial rule, removed countless shabtis from tombs and dispersed them across the globe. Statistically wise, over 350 museums house thousands of these tiny bodies, cataloged, labeled, and recorded and reordered within the logic of imperial collecting. The shabti's original purpose of serving one body, one spirit, one lineage has been replaced by another, serving the institutional appetite for classification, ownership, and display. Once an agent of devotion, the shabti has become an artifact of dispersal. Now, Milad approaches this dispersal not as a historical footnote, but at the very core of her artistic inquiry. Her practice resurrects the shabti as a metaphor for the displaced self, fragmented by migration, hybrid heritage, and the inherited weight of empire. Through her handcrafted visions and versions, cast in epoxy resin and layered with painted symbols and textile fragments, Milad reclaims the shabti as both subject and witness. These figures no longer labor for the dead. They stand in solidarity with the living, bearing the marks of cultural fracture and survival. The phrase, again, no Soy Ana Agnabi, I am not, I am foreign, captures this tension. It is a declaration of unbelonging, a refusal to be neatly identified or contained. Milad uses the shabti as a stand-in for the diasporic self, multiplied and scattered across worlds. Her altars of assembled figures evoke both a mourning and a resistance, a counter-funeral for the displaced dead, and a gathering of spirits that refuse erasure. In Milad's vision, the shabtis become agents of ritual reclamation. They carry not the silence of the museum vitrine, but the hum of multiplicity. Each one is imperfect, individual, imbued with traces of ancient symbols alongside the personal and the political. Some shimmer with gold, others appear scarred or broken. Together they speak a chorus of foreignness, Agnabi not as isolation, but as a shared identity. A recognition of difference as a form of kinship itself. By repeating and reimagining the shabtis, Milad transforms imperial excess into creative abundance. What was once a symptom of dispersal becomes a strategy of gathering. The installation here refuses the museum's desire for singularity and origin. Instead, Milad proposes a different kind of archive, one built from echoes, fractures, and gestures of care. Her shabtis are not ghosts of a lost civilization, they are survivors. Emissaries of complexity and reminders of what has been taken can still be spoken with new tongues. Through this act of reanimation, No Soy Ana Agnabi invites us to consider the afterlives of objects and the ethics of their display. The shabti, once buried in the intimacy of tombs, now stands in collective witness to centuries of displacement. Its silence transformed into testimony. Milad's work insists that even in dispersal, there is persistence. Even in fragmentation, there's a kind of wholeness that refuses to fade. Now, I invite you to take a moment to look closely at one or two figures and imagine kind of what histories, if they were taken from tombs, they might carry, and what stories they might tell if they could speak. I also invite you, these two on this piece here can actually be picked up and handled. So if you want a sense of the weight of what the rest are like, please feel free. They're just Velcroed, so you got to tug a little bit. So take a moment now if you would like to touch. Also notice the mirrors are being held up by little other kind of other type of shabtis as well. Now, as we move from these sculptural altars to the surrounding walls, you'll see how Milad translates the same complexity into her collage work. For Milad, layering is not simply an aesthetic choice, it's a politics of making, remembering and refusing. Every tear, every mark, every fragment in her collage work carries the residue of something already lived, already said, and already lost. Layering becomes her way of speaking across time, a language built from what has been buried, translated, misread, and carried forward. Milad's collages emerge from a lifelong negotiation with multiplicity: Egyptian, Honduran, American, woman, artist, foreigner, insider. Her compositions do not seek to reconcile these categories, but to hold them in productive tension. She refuses the linear grammar of traditional art history, the Western ideal that artworks must have origins, purity, or legible influences. Instead, her works are kind of palimpsests, surfaces of accumulation, where one history does not erase another, but coexists, overlaps, and argues with each other. From a distance, the pieces read as monumental tapestries, dense fields of texture, color, and mark-making. Upon closer review, they reveal their disobedience. Torn paper edges, hand-drawn hieroglyphs, and gestures in acrylic and ink fold over scraps of textile and gold leaf. Embedded fragments of Milad's earlier works resurface here as ghosts, material reincarnations that resist finality. The effect is both chaotic and meticulous, rhythmic and ruptured. Her works oscillate and bounce between building and erasure, between devotion and defacement. This method of collage making mirrors the condition of diasporic memory, incomplete, circular, and layered with contradiction. For those whose histories have been fractured by migration and colonial displacement, memory rarely arrives intact. It comes in shards, half-told truths, inherited names, languages, remembered only in fragments. Milad does not attempt to restore these pieces into coherence. She instead renders them incompleteness, making their incompleteness visible. Her layering becomes a form of care, an acknowledgement that what has been broken can still hold meaning in its disjointed form. In this way, Milad transforms collage into a counter-historical practice, an archive of refusal, where dominant archives privilege clarity, hierarchy, and taxonomy. Milad's visual language celebrates opacity, hybridity, and contradiction. The dense layering of material and symbols resists our desire for legibility. Her works ask us to linger in uncertainty, to confront the limits of what we think we know about history, identity, and belonging. The visual density of her composition echoes the sedimentation of empire itself, layers of cultural imposition, translation, and erasure. But Milad reverses that order. Instead of building monuments to power, she creates anti-monuments, tactile accumulations of personal and ancestral memory. Gold leaf, that traditional marker of sanctity, becomes a disruptive surface rather than a decorative one. Fragments of fabric recall both sacred wrappings and the textures of everyday life. Lines of script, sometimes legible, sometimes invented, suggest communication without translations. You can see actually a full poem here, sideways, here. Now, some of the text is readable, English, Spanish, Arabic, and some of it is made-up language, a language that refuses to be simplified for external consumption. Now, embracing this layered method, Milad situates herself in a lineage of artists for whom collage operates as a decolonial and feminist strategy. Her work resonates with the visual languages of diaspora and post-colonial expression, from the cut-and-paste resistance of Kara Walker's silhouettes to the lyrical density of Wangechi Mutu or the archival excavations of Amani Essa. Yet, Milad's voice remains singular, personal, playful, and deeply grounded in the rhythms of her own hand. Importantly, her collages also function as time machines, not in the sense of traveling backwards, but of collapsing temporal boundaries altogether. The past is not behind us here. It is embedded in every layer of the present. The future, too, seeps through in the reassembly, in the gesture of renewal. Each work becomes an act of temporal simultaneity, ancient and contemporary, sacred and irreverent, fragmentary and whole. Now, to stand here before one of Milad's collages is to have the opportunity to experience the visual equivalent of a multilingual speech. Voices interrupting, echoing, and translating each other in real time. Our eye is asked to read, but reading is never quite enough. One must feel the rhythm, the sense of weight, of material, listen for the frequencies of what is unspoken. The longer one looks, the more the work reveals, and with each revelation, another layer withdraws from view. Now, I would like you to think about how these layers might mirror your own sense of heritage, the parts you know clearly, the parts that feel distant or rewritten over time. Does anything stand out to you in any of these collages, the large-scale ones? The color pink, right? That's definitely very overwhelming in this space. What else?
I like what they did with the eyes here, like how they those different thumbtacks or stones or whatever.
What else?
I love the embroidered parts.
Right, the embroidery. There's also little beads and jewelry charms. There's even cutout sections where we can see the wall behind, right? Now, the next bit of information that I want to talk about is the museum, right? So Jackie's also addressing what we call the politics of display. Museums have long been built on an architecture of distance, glass, velvet ropes, vitrines, white walls. They promise preservation, but with that promise comes conditions. Look, but do not touch. Observe, but do not participate. Within this choreography of spectatorship, the institution's authority is performed through separation. Objects are rendered silent, viewers are disciplined, and meaning is delivered from above. This installation dismantles this distance with a combination of reverence and defiance. Her installation questions not only what we display, but how and why. Through her reimaginings of the shabtis, these overflowing altars and layered wallworks, Milad reveals and kind of revels in the politics of display as a system of power. One that organizes which histories are celebrated and which are marginalized, and who gets to decide what counts as heritage. At the heart of this critique is the profound reorientation of space. Milad refuses the logic of the vitrined artifact, static and sealed, and elevated beyond reach. Instead, she brings the sacred and the fragile down to a more than and less than human scale. Her altars are crowded with hand-formed shabtis that you can readily, very intimately approach. I've definitely seen people touching them. You know, their imperfect surfaces are textured by touch. She's forming these. These are clay that she's forming by hand, not by polish. The figures are not arranged as a taxidermy of difference, but as a gathering. It's alive. It has multitudinous and relational kind of feeling to them. This act of proximity transforms the exhibition space into what anthropologist Arjun Padurai called the counter museum, a place where value is not dictated by ownership, but by connection. Here, the politics of display shift from possession to participation. The viewer becomes us, we become a witness, a collaborator, even possibly a caretaker, rather than just a passive observer. Nowhere is this transformation more visible than in this wall piece, which appears to slip off the wall, defying the museum's first commandment, do not touch. This gesture, deceptively simple, is radical in its implications. The work begins as a sprawling mixed media canvas that cascades downwards, collapsing into our space. The painting no longer stays obediently on the wall. It refuses containment, unravels hierarchy, and demands bodily awareness. It shifts from being something to behold into something to be with. Milad intentionally invites us to touch, to sit, even to rest on the work, transforming the act of looking into an act of encounter. The body, long excluded from the sterile choreography of gallery etiquette, becomes central to its interpretation. The viewer's presence completes the piece. It becomes part of the layering, another trace among many. This invitation to touch subverts not only a museum's role, but a museum ideology, one rooted in colonial possession and reverence for the untouchable artifact. By collapsing the physical boundary between art and viewer, Milad challenges the notion that care is synonymous with distance. In her work, care is contact. It is intimacy, curiosity, reciprocity, a tactile form of knowledge making that honors both the artwork and the bodies that move among it. The slippage of the wall piece also mirrors the exhibition's broader themes of displacement and belonging. The work seems to lose its balance, to descend from the institutional pedestal and enter the world of the living. This visual and physical gesture evokes the instability of history itself. Its mark left a pink rectangle behind it, and how it can never remain fixed, how it must continue to fall, unravel, and be remade through engagement. By inviting us to sit, Milad introduces a politics of rest into a space historically devoted to reverence and restraint. Sitting becomes an act of quiet resistance, a moment of embodied belonging in an environment that so often denies it. To sit is to dwell, to claim space, to refuse the fleeting glance that museums often train into us. In this sense, Soy Ana Agnabi stages a radical redefinition of care, one in which preservation is not about keeping things apart, but about allowing them to live through interaction. These works do not seek to be eternal or unchanging. They're open systems, repositories of breath, touch, and shared time. This tactile permission also resonates with Milad's broader critique of the museum's colonial inheritance. The traditional museum, a space of accumulation, of artifacts taken and cataloged, often operates on a fantasy of stability, that the past can be fixed, preserved, and displayed without consequence. Milad disrupts this fantasy by showing that history, like her slipping wall work, is always in motion, always vulnerable to transformation. Through these gestures, Milad reclaims agency over both how art is experienced and how memory is held. Her installations do not demand reverence, but reciprocity. They promise a new model of belonging, one rooted not in ownership, but in relation, not in preservation, but in presence. In this reimagined space, we are not consumers of culture, but participants in its continued unfolding. To touch is not to violate, but to care. To sit is not to disrespect, but to stay. To share time with what has been displaced and what has been remade. Now, I want to ask you a question. Imagine if museum collections were curated not by ownership, but by relationships, by shared memory and mutual consent. How might that change what we value or how we display it?
I love that question. And it makes me think immediately about intimacy and, of course, by the relational, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what do we privilege? What kinds of memories do we privilege? How do we want to activate the archive? Just by the mere word archive means it's untouchable.
Mm-hmm.
So then it becomes used or useful or utilized very differently in the present. So I think that that's so beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to see community arrange an archive so that it impacts the present.
Mm-hmm.
That's amazing.
There's definitely some museums trying to do that, like LACMA in Los Angeles Museum of Contemporary Art is one example. I know the Contemporary Museum, when it was around, was also attempting to do that here in Baltimore under George Sissel. Anybody else? Also, please feel free if you need a chair. There's plenty of chairs. You can grab them, or you can sit on the floor, whichever you prefer. Now, there is...
So the question was more about relationship and theme or community? Could you repeat the question?
Yes. Imagine if museum collections were curated not by ownership, but by relationships, by shared memory and mutual consent. How might that change what we value or how we display it?
Well, I actually remember a very effective exhibition at Walters that was really about relationships, ancient and throughout time.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't recall the title of it right now, but I still recall seeing so many interesting images that were juxtaposed.
Mm-hmm.
And it gave me such a sense of, while history is always evolving, in some ways never changes. You know, there's two processes going on simultaneously, and there were ancient, if I remember correctly, ancient sculpture next to Louise Bourgeois' sculpture, and so on. It was just, it was very impactful.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think they also did a reimagining Baroque. Also was another good example of this.
I think that one was Mining the Museum with Fred Wilson.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was a really important exhibition.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Something also about the prothesis of legs, and it was like a piece of art in some ways. It was fascinating
Mm-hmm.
to see that.
So there's definitely examples of museums and galleries attempting to do that for one show.
Yeah,
But
one
what would happen if the whole institution operated on that basis? That could be an interesting experiment indeed. Then we start getting into like the technical of being like, wait a minute, what about this?
Logistics is always what you think of as a museum professional. You're like, how would we organize that? If we're going to have like multiple voices and people involved, how are we going to coordinate this? Do people need to be paid? Because we must pay their neighbors. So we start getting into like, okay,
Right.
how would that work?
And then also about copyright and about, privacy and all of that. It gets difficult.
But I think that's why a lot of institutions hold on to kind of like singular authority, because it's a lot easier to have one person in charge.
Yes.
Or a small team. And as soon as you kind of like, let's do community curation, then you're like, oh gosh, now we have to think very differently. And there's so many more things that kind of go into an exhibition and into our
Takes a lot more manpower and hours.
a lot more time.
It does. It really does.
Because you've got to build trust, you know, to
Exactly. And oh no, you're good. I was going to say our contemporary world is so built on speed,
things like built on the
right? So the demand to slow down, to rest, to take the time to build feels impossible oftentimes. It really does.
Especially like now where the idea of truth and telling of history and the editing of those truths really does speak to inaccuracy.
Mm-hmm.
And with community doing it, then the multiplicity of those voices actually tells a holistic story
Mm-hmm.
of a time and a place, right?
Exactly. But then also thinking about, if you're working with a community, whether they've been allowed to be part of the archive or not. So thinking about indigenous communities here in the United States and in Canada, we have basically secondhand accounts of American and Western settlers' account of indigenous communities, and they were often exaggerated, not to be trusted, and very little accounts from the actual people themselves. It's complicated. My students hate when I answer, well, it depends. They ask a question, I'm like, well, it depends. There's no easy answers all type of answers. We live in a nuanced world, even though we want to simplify and have universal truths. That doesn't exist anymore. So, in regards to this show, there is kind of a pulse that runs through the show and kind of an undercurrent felt as much as unseen. It hums through the dense collages, the gathered shabti, the inscriptions that slip between legibility and illegibility and loss. It's not a literal sound here, but a resonance. The collective vibration of memory, displacement, and survival. In this sense, the exhibition is not silent. It sings. It becomes what Milad calls a living chorus, an assemblage of fragments, languages, and forms that refuse erasure through sheer insistence on presence. Milad's practice can be understood as a form of ritual. Not ritual in the sense of religion, but as a series of deliberate gestures that bind material, time, and intention. Each act of layering, each sculpted shabti, each stitched fragment becomes kind of an invocation, a way of calling the past into the present without demanding resolution. The result is an atmosphere that feels ceremonial, yet unprescribed, sacred, yet porous. This approach often redefines what ritual can mean in the context of contemporary art. In Milad's hands, ritual is not about repetition for its own sake. It is about the continuity of care, the making itself, cutting, painting, layering, and remaking is a form of devotion to histories that have been fractured or denied. Every piece in here holds a residue of this devotion, carrying the gestures of the artist's hand like inscriptions of persistence. The chorus Milad constructs is polyphonic, meaning it contains many voices, none of which dominate. Ancient Egyptian funerary echoes overlap with diasporic memory. Fragments of family lineage blend with contemporary resistance. Her repeated use of the shabti, not only in the sculptures, but also in the imagery, become a kind of refrain, not merely repetition, but a rhythmic return that honors the scattered dead and the living descendants of displacement. Each figure hums with its own timbre, but together they form a field of collective resonance, an ensemble of the unassimilated. This chorus is not harmonious in the conventional sense. It does not seek unity or perfection. Instead, it thrives in dissonance, the layered textures, the ruptures, the competing tones that mirror the experience of multiplicity itself. Milad's chorus refuses to flatten difference into coherence. It speaks in many languages at once, sometimes audibly, sometimes in the silence of the gesture and material. In this multiplicity, Milad finds a radical form of belonging, not the belonging of sameness, but the belonging of shared refusal. Refusal in this context becomes an act of love, a refusal to simplify, to translate, to perform coherence for the comfort of the viewer or the institution. No Soy Ana Agnabi embodies this politics of refusal at every level. It rejects the museum's logic of containment and categorization, instead insisting on fluidity, movement, and messiness. The works invite presence rather than comprehension. They ask to be encountered, not explained. Milad's reimagined shabtis are key players in this living ritual. Once servants in the afterlife, they now act as intercessors, figures that bridge temporal, cultural, and spiritual realms. They are witnesses and participants, ancestors and avatars. Some are pristine, others fragmented, their surfaces layered with pigment, script, and memory. Gathered en masse, they appear both mournful and celebratory, a procession that refuses to be stilled. In their repetition, Milad transforms the colonial excess of museum collections into a new kind of plentitude, one that is communal, embodied, and defiantly alive. The physical experience of this exhibition amplifies this feeling. The viewer, us, do not simply look at No Soy Ana Agnabi. We have to move through it. The scale of the collages surround our bodies. The density of the installations draws one in, and the permission to touch and sit near certain works shift the audience from observer to participant. This embodied spectatorship echoes ritual practice, the understanding that meaning arises not from distance but from presence, from shared breath and shared space. Silence, too, becomes part of the ritual world. In a world saturated with noise and explanation, Milad's silences are profound. They make room for what cannot be spoken, for grief, for longing, for the complexity of identities that do not fit within inherited narratives. Her refusal to translate these silences is itself a form of resistance, a way of honoring what remains unsayable. And yet, even in silence, the works vibrate. The gold leaf flickers like breath. The script hums beneath its own erasure. The shabtis seem to murmur and talk amongst themselves. This quiet vitality is what transforms the exhibition from a static display into a living archive, one that refuses to close, one that keeps speaking even after we have left the room. Through this living chorus, Milad expands the ideals of what art can do. The exhibition does not reconstruct lost histories or propose closure. Instead, it keeps them open, suspended in dialogue. It asks, how do we live with what has been displaced? How do we care for the ghosts of what we've inherited? The answer for Milad lies not in recovery, but in reactivation, in creating spaces where fragments can coexist, where voices can overlap without domination, where difference can resonate rather than reconcile. In the end, this is not a lament for what is gone, but a testament to what persists. It is an altar of echoes, a site where memory, voice, and refusal intertwine into something luminous and alive. The works do not whisper for resolution. They insist on continuation. To stand within this space is to enter the chorus oneself, to become part of the ritual, part of the refusal, and part of the ongoing act of remembering and remaking. Now, as you take in this space, I would like to invite you to consider, what would it mean to build rituals not around certainty, but around care for what has been broken or displaced? Thank you. Any questions?
I have a question about assembly and making. Is she working on the ground in multiple pieces? Tell me about how the scale happens.
So she does, I know the answer to this one. So she has, her studio's pretty similar size to this space, right? So she has them on the wall and is working up and down big ladders. But oftentimes, when she's cutting up stuff, she has a big table in the middle of her studio, and she just kind of sits and cuts big piles of fabric, as well as, you know, turning her drawings into fabric, her own photos into fabric, because she goes into museum collections and is invited to handle their shabti. Like, she came into our collection and handled our shabti, which is in the front. So she's often works from a big pile and then attaches it vertically. That's a great question.
And where are your shabtis and where is the rest of your collection?
The rest of our collection is in a storage space not far from here. It's next to the bathrooms. We're trying to make a collections access lab. But we got to figure out what we have.
Did she consider actually juxtaposing some of the actual pieces from the collection?
So that we have them in the front.
Oh, you have them in the
Okay. So we have 2 of them there.
Can I ask about the sculptural squiggles?
Yes.
I assume sticker squiggles and sculptures?
Yeah, so she's basically, it's the same like material the shabtis are made from, and she basically took the forms from her collages, like the one behind you, and made them 3D.
So she's sort of referencing, so the physical reference would be her own movement.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
I also thought of, this is not a question, but more when you were talking about how it's like breaking down the barriers of like ropes in front of it, like just seeing all the knots and the ropes sort of untangled and spread around made me think of exactly what you were saying. Like as you were saying, yeah, there's like ropes and knots and chains and how they're all just kind of hanging flaccid.
Mm-hmm. I will say originally we weren't planning on putting these, because these were just going to go through the tapestries. But then we felt it was too monumental to not have anything in between and too separate. So then we went up to the vinyl cutter upstairs, took this from this one, put it in an Illustrator, cut it, and kind of just had fun sticking them.
And that was collaborative between like curator and artist?
Yes. Yes.
It also goes along with her refusal thing, not keeping this a art object that's, something that you appreciate from afar in a museum.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of, it's got this, to me they look very whimsical.
They do.
Shapes that almost nonsensical. But I'm sure they have symbolism for her.
I wonder if you could speak to, I know it was brought up that pink is like a very repeated dominated color, but the choice of that.
There's 2 reasons. One is my guess and one is a Jackie answer. The Jackie answer is she just likes pink. My guess too, because she is very into not answering all the questions. That's also part of her practice. You'll ask a question, she's like, I'm not going to tell you. But for me, it also speaks to how, ancient objects, we see them, they're white, they're tan, they're these very neutral colors, but they were actually very brightly painted during their time. So to me, I think it also references that in my own interpretation.
To me, it brings in like the female and the body and like the decor and stuff, like the ornamentation of it and stuff.
I definitely think there's definitely that element there as well.
I'm really interested in your framing, or the way that you describe this work, that hierarchy does not invite intimacy. And I found that really curious because hierarchy is a distancing tool. And in the way that it looks in this space, that there is no real hierarchy, that I keep wondering, well, what is making this intimate? And I keep going back to the touch that you were talking about and the opportunities for reflection or the opportunity for specialness, which is where things glitter and like I just saw a rhinestone or something sparkle. But it was just really interesting to think about power in those ways or hierarchy in that way, that power inherently does not allow for intimacy. And so that's just a real curious thing. And I keep applying what you're saying in this work to our present moment and how intimacy is very much lost right now, right?
The male loneliness epidemic.
Yeah, right.
Yes.
Well, Susan, empathy is being derided.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, which is considered more feminine than masculine,
Yeah.
but not necessarily so.
But that's exactly.
But that's the, that's the kind of rigid hierarchy that's being promoted at this time. So,
One of the little subtleties that I noticed that like kind of ties in with that, but a little more like directly, like the intimacy of touching with skin versus with a glove, and how like in some of the pictures she's handling the
Gloves.
object gloved and handling it non-gloved. I like that.
So it's literal touch, not only being able to touch, but seeing touch.
touch these.
The one in the back you're allowed to touch. Just because we don't want these coming down. Safety. If it was up to Jackie, she'd be like, yeah, sure, touch. But I'm like, insurance and safety, that one's fine.
Are these always displayed on these like reflective tables? They're fabulous.
So that was kind of a last minute. Originally, we were going to have a 30-foot table in here. But then we were given an estimate. We can't afford that. But originally it was going to be a white table with like little dips where they would sit in, and when that fell through, and then she was like, I kind of wasn't feeling it too because it gives a little too much hierarchy. So then she just ordered 2 of these and tested them out in her studio, and I went, I love this. And she's like, what if we put it on a table? I know, like, no, we got to put it on the floor. Come down. And then also, it's like these pieces are so kind of overwhelming. So not only Jackie's pieces, you have a lot of push and pull this way, but with this installation, you have a lot of up and down, which also feels like a more intimate kind of womb-like space where you're being embraced. And the pink, and all the pink. So, definitely.
I was just telling Zoe before the lights were focused, they were from the last show, so they were all over the place, and some of them were reflecting off.
You can see that there.
And
There's a pink little reflection over there.
but
So
they
there
were
was a lot
all
more.
over the walls. It was beautiful, but it didn't look good for the art.
The rest of the art. If we had more lights, if the electrical could handle it, but that's the max.
Not to make anybody self-conscious, but it's also fun to like look at people's reflections because they kind of feel upside down.
Exactly. And then also, the shabtis are being reflected and mirrored, and, thinking about, the past, the present, the future, other dimensions and realities that these kind of exist. The afterlife, the spiritual realm being found in mirrors as well. So there's a lot of different reasoning where we're like, the mirrors just make sense for this installation. Yes. So on our website, we have a wonderful photographer, Vivian Marie Doring, who documents all our shows, and she did a really good job with the color balancing. It comes across really well. So she's really great.
And yet, there's nothing like being here in person.
Yeah, the in-person experience, however, yeah, is definitely impossible to recreate online.
And if you haven't seen the new Goucher website for the galleries, it's amazing.
GoucherArtGalleries.com. The one-stop shop for all exhibitions and art and related events on campus. So make sure you check that out. And sign up for the newsletter there.
Do you have a particular curatorial vision for this space? Do you work very much with Baltimore artists? Are you connected to curriculum? What's the reason?
That's a great question. We're building from the ground up, basically. So sky's the limit, quite literally. Right now, we're starting with kind of local, although we do have some more national people coming in. We have until 2029 booked. And two of our future artists are actually standing in this room. We got Jessica Damon, who'll be in 2028. We'll have a solo show here, and Zoe Charlton in 2027. We'll have a solo in here. So we had two future artists as well. So this space is definitely like our flagship space. So this will be, yeah, we have the Rosenberg space, so that'll be more community, kind of local artists. And then the window space is more installation based. So that's a lot more of experimental, free-for-all type of space. But we're definitely trying to reinvigorate the galleries, get up interest in art history, because Goucher does not have an art history program anymore. I learned that out when I was talking to students talking about Turner's painting, and they were like, who? And I was like, oh, that's bad. That's not good. See, we have a film screening series, art history lecture series, art exhibitions. We're going to start workshops, talks, sketch hours, and a bunch of performances, as well as getting a handle of our collection and making it accessible to the public and online. So, yeah, been a little busy.
And I bet you're just all student labor because
basically, yes.
It's going to be you wearing all the hats.
Yes. So, but I still want the space to be accessible. We are partnering with the Baltimore, the City of Accessible Arts. Accessibility is a big focus with all of this building as well. So all of our artist talks will have ASL interpreters, but tours, don't have the budget for that quite yet, but that's why we're recording and making transcriptions available on our website and basically working with what we can. But I still want this space to feel like anyone emerging mid-career and established could reach out and say, hey, I got a really cool idea, because I'd love to hear it. So we got some flexibility. That's some great questions. As well as collaborating with other schools and the local museums as well. We have great parking. It's confusing to get around, but we have great parking compared to some other spaces. So I think that allows us a lot of opportunities. Any other questions? Curiosities? Jackie's not here, but half of her answers would be, I don't want to tell you. And that's part of her work, and that's valid. So.
That's one of the best gallery talks I've
I'm glad you felt that. Thanks. I did.
Some aspect of that, or
The whole thing is recorded, and that'll be on the website. And I did cut out the whole conclusion. So, but that's basically I was like, we're going on a little long, but I think it's. Yes, Jackie has an artist talk and book signing October 12th. Yes, there's a whole book that was published in collaboration with this. And so she's selling two versions. One, $80 is just the book. One for $500, you also get an original artwork in the book.
And 10,000 if you want it signed.
And we'll actually, if you ordered one through Be More Art already, you can pick it up here in person after the 12th. If not, you'll have to coordinate with her. So October 12th, 6 to 8 p.m. It's a Sunday night. right outside in the forum, she'll have slides and the whole shebang, and she'll be here. Thank you for coming.